Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's Sohbet and Sufi meditation on this Monday, the 24th of July 2023. I hope you are well wherever you're tuning into this from and having a good day or a good evening in other parts of the world. Um, we are now, I make it as the 6th of Muharram, and Muharram is the first month in the Hijri calendar, which is sometimes called the Islamic or Muslim calendar. Correct term is the Hijri calendar because this is dated from the Hijra that the Prophet Muhammad SAW and his companions made from Mecca to Medina. But Muharram is the first of the months within this calendar. So, 6 days ago, we celebrated the Muslim New Year. But although we celebrate the Muslim New Year, and although Muharram is the beginning of a new year, it is a clean slate for Muslims. But Muharram is a month that has profound spiritual meaning for Muslims because there were certain events which happened in Muharram which were really tragic. And we still remember these events to this day, over 1400 years later. Now, I'm looking at this through the eyes of a Muslim, who's an English Muslim, who's also a Naqshbandi Muslim. I mean, a member of the Naqshbandi tariqat, which is one of the different, some people say Sufi orders, but it's like a school of spirituality that we belong to within Islam. I mean, just like you can go to Oxford or you can go to Cambridge, but you're still studying the same thing. So it's, some people, they try to make out this is something other than Islam. It's not. It's just like if you go to Oxford or you go to Cambridge or you go to Birmingham and you study the same degree, it's a little different, but it's just because of the teachers, it's the same subjects that we're learning. Now, I mention that though because, of course, Muharram is very big within. It's a very important event within the calendar for Shia Muslims. But just because the Shias place so much emphasis on the month of Muharram, this does not mean it is a Shia thing. And it is not something which is universal for all Muslims. The Prophet Muhammad SAW was a prophet for us all. The Prophet Muhammad SAW was actually a prophet for humanity. He wasn't only a prophet for Muslims. He was the last prophet sent to humanity. Now, Imam Hussain was his grandson, the grandson of the beloved of Allah and the beloved to his grandfather. So you think, what does this make Imam Hussain within Islam? We have hadiths transmitted to us within the Sunni tradition, let alone whatever hadiths the Shias have. The Imams Hassan and Hussein were the most beloved to the Prophet Muhammad SAW. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW, it would seem, according to these hadiths, was well aware something would happen to them, something tragic. But they were beloved to the Prophet Muhammad SAW. And if they were beloved to the Prophet Muhammad SAW, who was the beloved to Allah? How beloved to Allah must Imams Hassan and Hussein be? We have a long history of honoring their memory within all of Islam, Sunni and Shia alike. So, if any of you is saying that this is a Shia thing, if anyone says to you this, they are wrong. This is to try and create misunderstanding and sectarian discord between brothers and sisters within Islam. We have different schools of thought, different madhabs, different tariqas. But that does not mean we belong to different religions. We have the same deen. It's just some people might follow the Oxford syllabus, and some people might follow the Cambridge syllabus, and some people might follow the Birmingham syllabus. Within Islam, the syllabuses are Maliki, Shafi, Hanafi, and Hanbali. Within fiqh, and Jafari also within fiqh. And there are others that are smaller ones. I mean, Imam Ali Gomar said that there's something like around 80 plus madhab within Islam. Just because many of them are smaller and less well known doesn't mean that they're not authentic. In addition to the madhab within tariqah is the path to marifa, to gnosis. It's the spiritual essence of Islam. And just like you've got different syllabuses within the fiqh, you've got different syllabuses within spirituality within Islam. And that's what these tariqas are, depending on which sheikh people are learning from. All of the sheikhs learn from their sheikhs, learn from their sheikhs, eventually going back to the same sheikhs, going back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that doesn't matter whether they are Sunni sheikhs or Shia sheikhs. They're all following back to the same original sheikhs. Like Imam Jafar as-Sadiq. He was a sheikh of the Sunnis. He was a sheikh of the Shias. He was a sheikh of fiqh, and he was a sheikh of tasawwuf. So he was a sheikh for us all. So people should stop fighting about these sorts of things and think a bit more deeply and try to look for the best understanding to move forward, where we can all move forward together as a community and as community of communities. And I wish I didn't have to make these comments before I go into the main thing which I wish to discuss. But unfortunately, I have to, because I know there will be some people who they will watch this, or they will talk to the people who watch this. Well, how come you do this? How come you do that? How come you mention Naqshbandi? How come you mention different schools of fiqh? But unfortunately, people do. So going back to my original thing I'm discussing, Muharram is a sacred and special month for all Muslims. It's the first month in our calendar. And it is a month of profound spiritual significance. It was during this month that a terrible, heart-wrenching event happened. On the plains of Karbala in Iraq, an event that is etched into the hearts of every believer. And this was the day when Imam Hussain, the grandson of the beloved Prophet Muhammad SAW, and his small band of followers, his family and his small group of supporters, stood firm for what they believed in the face of tyranny, in the face of fitna and corruption. They stood firm for what they believed. Some people say this was a battle. In a sense, it was a battle. It was a battle in the sense it was a battle between good and evil. It was a battle of wills. But it was not a battle like a military battle. If Imam Hussain was going on a military battle, he wouldn't have took his most vulnerable family members with him and just been traveling with his family and a small band of followers. You do not do that in a military battle. It is not strategically a good thing to do. Traveling with women and young children without a huge army to protect them. It's true. Sometimes larger armies might travel with some people like that, but protected by a large army. This is not what Imam Hussein had. It was a small caravan of people. But an army did come against them. An army sent there to destroy them. And that's why it was standing against tyranny and oppression. For the teachings that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the grandfather of Imam Hussein, stood for. In the eloquent words of the Persian poet and philosopher Allama Iqbal, Imam Hussein uprooted despotism forever till the day of resurrection. He watered the dry garden of freedom with the surging wave of his blood, and indeed he awakened the sleeping Muslim nation. If Imam Hussein had aimed at acquiring a worldly empire, he would not have traveled the way he did. Hussein weltered in blood and dust for the sake of truth. Verily, therefore, became the bedrock of the Muslim creed, La ilaha illallah. So what does Muharram mean to a Sufi, or specifically a member of the Naqshbandi tariqat? Now, Sufism, in Arabic known as Tasawwuf, it's the mystical inner dimension of Islam. It's what in other religions may be called gnosis, which means the path to knowing yourself. And of course, there is a hadith attributed to the Prophet Muhammad that he who knows himself knows God. Now, many people may quote the hadith, but what is the methodology of how to get to know yourself? And within tariqah, we have zikr, meditation, or literally means remembrance, but it's a form of meditation that we perform. And salawat, reading of blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad, and various other practices. And it's through these practices that we can begin to get to know ourselves and who we are. But you can't just know yourself without doing meditation or contemplation. Within the heart of Sufism pulsates an intense love for the Prophet Muhammad and his family, the Ahlul Bayt. The Naqshbandi tariqat is the only tariqat which at least some of the silsilas, they trace back to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. But even in these silsilas, such as the ones I belong to, they go through Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, who was Ahlul Bayt. But even within the Naqshbandi tariqah, I found there are silsilas in Indonesia, and they begin with Imam Ali alayhi salam. And aside from the Naqshbandi tariqah, all tariqahs go through Imam Ali alayhi salam, father of Imam Hussain, who was Ahlul Bayt. So the Ahlul Bayt and the love of the Ahlul Bayt is really crucial and an essential aspect of Sufism. And we will be raised with those whom we love. Something that Sufi sheikhs often remind people of. We'll be raised with those whom we love. This is why we try to cultivate love in our heart for our sheikhs and for the Ahlul Bayt, for the Awliya Allah, and obviously for the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because we will be with those whom we love. This is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If we love shaitan, and the people who love shaitan will be raised with the lovers of shaitan. But if we love the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if we love the Ahlul Bayt and the Awliya Allah, we'll be raised with the holy people. We will be with those whom we love. And love of the Ahlul Bayt merits reward from Allah because it is the Prophet's right on the people as they become a part of him and he a part of them. In Sufi tradition, there is a deep resonance with the tragedy of Kabbalah. The beloved Sufi master, Hazrat Inayat Khan, poignantly said, it is the love of the family of the Prophet ﷺ which becomes a torch for the seeker on the path. This light guides the Sufi in the turbulent sea of earthly life, and hence Muharram holds a profound significance as a time of mourning and of reflection. Sufism places great emphasis on the inner spiritual life, the life of the heart. Sufis do not merely observe Muharram as an external ritual, but rather it's an intense internal journey. Muharram for us is not just something where people relive a ritual to mourn the physical martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his family and followers, but it's to reflect on our own shortcomings. It's an internal time of reflection where we examine ourselves and we question if we were there on that day. If we were there on that day, would we have been among the people standing with Imam Hussain and his family, or would we have been among the people who stood idly by, or among the armies of Yazid. This is the real spiritual journey. It's to recognize that each one of us has the capacity for good and evil, and that making the right choices, it's at times not easy. It can be very difficult. You imagine on that day a huge army that came against Imam Hussain and his family, demanding they surrender, demanding they give up the rights that they have as a family, as the Prophet Muhammad's family, seeking to completely humiliate them. You imagine on that day this huge army standing against you. Would you have stood against that army without the ability to be able to fight that army, without the ability to be able to protect yourself and your family? Would you have stood with Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Would you have stood with his family? These are the questions that we ask ourselves, because Karbala is not something which only happened at Karbala. Karbala is something that happened in the 1930s in Germany, when people of Jewish, of Roma, and other backgrounds were persecuted by the Nazis. Karbala happened again in Bosnia during the 1990s, when Bosniaks were persecuted just for being Bosniak and being Muslim. Karbala has happened again in Myanmar when the Rohingya were being persecuted. And you don't have to be Muslim to stand up for what is right, to stand up for justice, to stand up to respect every human being. So when we ask ourselves, if all them years ago, nearly 1.5 millennia ago, would we have been standing with Imam Hussain and his family? Or would we have been standing among the armies of Yazid? Or would we have been standing idly by? It's the same question we ask. Where would we have been standing in Nazi Germany during the 1930s and 40s? Where would we have been standing in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the 1990s? Where would we have been standing in Myanmar more recently? And the same is true of many other countries. We are asking a question about ourselves. It's no good talking about Karbala and mourning Imam Hussain if we would have been among those who would have stood amongst the armies of Yazid. It's no good us mourning Imam Hussain and crying about it if we would have been among those who would have stood idly by because we didn't have the moral fiber to be able to stand by Imam Hussain. Or we are among the munafiqeen. We are among the hypocrites. May Allah save us from that. This is why for us, Muharram is a time for us to examine ourselves, to examine our own hearts, to examine our own moral fiber, and question, who are we? Where would we have stood? And where do we stand today where there is injustice? And whether that be injustice here or injustice internationally, where do we stand? And what do we do? Even if we are right, if we ourselves become oppressors of another group of people, even if those people were doing wrong, but if we ourselves, through our actions, become oppressors or become terrorists, which are also a form of oppressors, then we only become amongst the armies of Yazid. We will be no different to them. This is why it's important for us to examine ourselves. Stop pointing a finger at other people and saying, I belong to the right group and everybody else is wrong. Whether your group is a particular Sufi tariqat, whether your group is a particular madhab. I heard recently, I saw on social media, one of my friends, he has changed his madhab. Was Hanafi, now he's become Shafi. There are people condemning him because he changed his madhab. What is this? As Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, we recognize all of the madhab. Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi, Maliki. Within Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, we recognize these are all right paths. Yes, they vary, but they are fine, whichever one you want to follow, whichever one makes sense. That's Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat. If you start saying that Hanafi is right and Shafi is wrong, or Maliki is right and Hanafi is wrong, you are not Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat. You are following something else. You undermine the very basis of Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, which is respect. As Sheikh Dr. Ali Gomar pointed out all them years ago when I listened to him in that speech, and it was confirmed to me more recently by other senior scholars, that there are over 80 madhab that they recognize at Al-Azhar. Over 80. And yet, a friend, he decides that for whatever reason, it makes more sense for him to follow Shafi instead of Hanafi. And he is being condemned for this. It's his own business. It's no one else's business. No one else has a right to question whichever madhab that he chooses to follow. He's a scholar as well. And when a person is a scholar, if they choose to follow a different madhab, or they don't even have to, they get to a point where they actually transcend the madhab. Because madhab it's something that it's to simplify things, to make things easier for the new Muslims, for the young Muslims. That if you do these things, you're on the right lines, you'll be okay. Should a person become a scholar, an alim, they don't need to worry too much about these things because they are learning from primary sources. So you will notice this with scholars. Even if they belong to Shafi madhab, they will do some things that's a little different from other Shafis. Even they belong to Hanafi madhab, they will do some things that's a little different from other Hanafis. Because they've learned from primary sources. And on some details, they decide to follow something slightly different. SubhanAllah, The level of ignorance among Muslims today, it is scary. Where are we at where someone gets condemned just for changing their madhab? He's not apostatized. He's simply changed his syllabus. I mean, would you condemn someone because they left their course at the University of Birmingham and continued it at the University of Oxford? Tell me, how does that make sense? So we should reflect on our own shortcomings and renew our commitment to the path of righteousness. This concept is beautifully captured within one of Mevlana Rumi's words. The wound is the place where the light enters you. The tragedy of Kabbalah becomes a wound that enlightens, leading the believer on a journey of internal transformation. Imam Hussein's stand against tyranny and his sacrifice for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a source of deep spiritual inspiration. The Prophet Muhammad said, as narrated in Bukhari, Hussain is from me, and I am from Hussain. Allah loves whoever loves Hussain. Hussain is just someone, he's amazing. He is he's a great scholar, he's a great saint, he is on so many levels, he is an amazing role model of someone who would make the biggest sacrifice. I watched again and I reposted a beautiful talk by Maulana Sheikh Hisham, which someone put some nice graphics to it, one of people, probably at Sufi Life. And it's got a candle that's burning. And Sheikh Hisham says that the candle is sacrificing itself in order to give us light. Even though it is burning, it's not complaining. The candle sacrifices itself in order to give us light. Imam Hussain sacrificed himself in order to protect and defend Islam, and in order that that light may reach us 1.5 millennia later, and the people today will still remember what the real Islam is. Even though there are many corruptions and fitnas which have come along the way and have confused people and are confusing people today, but through the sacrifice of Imam Hussain, we see the real Islam. Islam, along with all spirituality, is about sacrifice. It's about giving from ourselves. And when you give from yourself, you are taking from yourself to give to someone else. It's the meaning of zakat. It's the meaning of sadaqah. It's the meaning of service. In whichever form you take service, you give of your time, you give of your health, you give of your energy, you give of your wealth. Whenever you give, if you give genuinely, it's a form of sacrifice. You exhaust yourself in order to give to others. This is what Imam Hussain did. He exhausted himself in order to give to people, to give to humanity. And that's why he is so beloved, even by people who aren't Muslims. When they hear about the life of Imam Hussain and what Imam Hussain did, They have nothing but admiration. When I visited Kabbalah to go to a conference in 2019 of Sunni and Shia ulama to talk about human rights, there were Christians there among us, Christians who came to honor the memory of Imam Hussein and to honor those who honored the memory of Imam Hussein and to support. And they're Christians, they're not Muslims. So Imam Hussein is someone who he inspires everybody. But let's use this to analyze ourselves and reflect on our own spiritual state and align ourselves with the path of love, divine love and devotion and service. Align ourselves with that path which will lead to peace and harmony on this earth and not more problems. I mean, this is an idea which is encapsulated in the words of one of our Sufi sheikhs, Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. The outer war is a physical jihad, and the inner war is a spiritual jihad. The month of Muharram calls us to wage this inner war, to strive against our lower selves, to purify our hearts, and to strengthen our relationship with the divine. As we commemorate the tragedy of Karbala during this Muharram, let us remember these profound words from Rumi. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. Let us strive to change ourselves, to become better versions of ourselves, and bring ourselves closer to the Creator. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, that He will not change the condition of the people until we change what is within ourselves. We'll leave the Sohbet there. Thank you for your time, for your attention, for tuning into these. I hope they are useful to you. And as we observe Muharram, may we honor the memory of Imam Hussein and his legacy through living our lives in truth just as he did. If there's anything which I've said which you've benefited from and it's inspired you, then I give thanks to my parents, my sheikhs, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if I've made any mistakes, then please forgive me, for the mistakes are all my own. Bismillah. It's rather late. A number of things happened today, so I'm going to do a short zikr to close this. But inshallah, next week we'll get a chance to do the longer zikr. نويت ربي نويت الأسرة نويت القهوة نويت الاعتكاف نويت السلوك نويت الرياضة لله تعالى في هذا جميع. We begin with the recitation of the Kalama Shahada. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Read the Astaghfirullah which is to ask Allah's forgiveness. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. أستغفر العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم وأتوب إليه. أستغفر العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم وأتوب إليه إنه هو التواب الرحيم. يا وهاب يا وهاب يا وهاب يا مصبيب الأسباب يا مفاتي الأبواب يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار يا دليل المتخير يا غيث المستخير يا قيوم يا قيوم يا ذو الجلال والإكرام وفيد أمري إلا إن الله بصير بالعباد. Rabbi Tashrifa, direct your heart to the heart of your Sheikh. Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن من اليسرى فإذا فرغت فانصب إلى ربك فارغب. إخلاص الشفاء. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. سورة الفلق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق ومن شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. سورة الناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس مالك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. There is no God except the God. La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammedur Rasulallah, alayhi salatullah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, Muhammedur Rasulallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedur Rasulallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedur Rasulallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedan Nabiyallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedan Nabiyallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedan Nabiyallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammedan Nabiyallah, alayhi salatullah, la ilaha illallah, La ilahe illallah Muhammedul Habiballah alayhi salatu la ilahe illallah La ilahe illallah Muhammedul Habiballah alayhi salatu la ilahe illallah La ilahe illallah Muhammedul Habiballah alayhi salatu la ilahe illallah La ilahe illallah Muhammedul Habibullah alayhi salatullah la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah Muhammedul Habibullah alayhi salatullah la ilaha illallah Muhammedul Habibullah alayhi salatullah la ilaha illallah Muhammedul Habibullah alayhi salatullah la ilaha illallah Muhammedul Habibullah alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah la Muhammad Shafi Allah alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah Muhammad Shafi Allah alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah Muhammad Shafi Allah alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah Muhammad Shafi Allah alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammad al-Mustafa, alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammad al-Mustafa, alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammad al-Mustafa, alayhi salatu la ilaha illallah, La ilahe illallah, La ilahe illallah, Muhammedur Rasulallah, sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem. Hasbunallah ve ni'mel vakil. Wal hulu la quwwata illa billah khilal azim. Salawatu Sharifa. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم 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 اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. صل يا ربي وسلم على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى كل أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. على أشرف الأمين سيدنا محمد صلوات على أفضل الأمين سيدنا محمد صلوات على أكمل الأمين سيدنا محمد صلوات صلوات الله وملائكته وأنبيائه ورسوله وجميع خلقه على محمد وعلى آل محمد عليه وعليهم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. ورضي الله تبارك وتعالى عن سادتنا شعب رسول الله أجمعين وعن تبين بهم بإحسان وعن مجتدين آمدين وعن علماء متقين وعن أولياء الصالحين عن مشايخنا في طريقة نقشبندية آلية وإلا ولي سونغو قدس الله تعالى ومزاكيا ونعو تعالى أجرات مباركة ونعو تعالى علينا من بركاتهم وفيوداتهم دائما والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. اللهم بارك ثواب ما قرناه ونور ما ترناه هدية وسيلة من روح نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإلا أنبياء وإلا أولياء Kasatani Ruhi Imam Tariqa wa Goti Karika Shabohadi Naqshband Mabidul Waisi Bukhari wa ila Sheikh Abdul Qadir Al Jalani wa ila Sheikh Sharif Hidayatullah wa ila Sunan Ampul wa ila Sunan Giri wa ila Sheikh Yusuf Mukassar wa ila Sheikh Abdullah Fayaz Dagestani wa ila Zindapir wa ila Sufi Abdullah wa ila Maulana Sheikh Nazim Adil Lakani wa ila Sheikh Dawood Ras Owen wa ila Gusto wa ila Sheikh Adang Badruddin wa ila Maulana Sheikh Hisham Kabani wa ila Sheikh Padsha wa ila Sheikh Dr. Tariq Qadri wa ila Sheikh Muhammad Adil wa ila Dr. Noor Kabani wa ila Kiai Mustafa Akil وإلى كيايا خليل ستاكوف وإلى سري سرطينا وصديقيون الفاتحة أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Ya Allah, we pray for the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, all the previous prophets and their noble families, and especially the Ahlul Bayt. We pray for the Sahaba Ikram, the Khilaf or Rashideen, the Ulama and the Uliya. We pray for my sheikhs, all the sheikhs of the Naqshbandi tariqat, my personal sheikhs, among them Sheikh Sufi Abdullah, Maulana Sheikh Nazim and Sheikh Dawood Rasoin. And we pray for my dear father, Richard Kevin Armstrong. Ya Allah, bless their souls and raise their stations in your divine presence. Ya Allah, we pray for all of our mothers and fathers. We pray for all of our families. We pray for all of our ancestors. And if there is anything which any of us do or will do that is pleasing to you, we pray you grant the blessing of this upon our ancestors, upon our parents, cared for us while we were small children. And we pray that you grant, that you look after our parents or our parents' souls in the next world as they looked after us as small children. Ya Allah, we pray for our aunties and uncles, our brothers and sisters-in-law, nieces and nephews, and especially our dear wives or husbands, or future wives or future husbands, children or future children and future generations. Ya Allah, grant our families to always be under your divine protection and blessing. Grant us to have good health and long lives. Grant us to be always under your guidance and spiritual direction through the connection with the awliya Allah and the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu. Ya Allah, forgive us for our manifold sins and weaknesses, and grant that you guide our eyes and our ears, our hearts, our minds, and our hands, so that we are doing what is good, what is beneficial. Guide our thoughts, that our thoughts may always be blessed and holy. Let us never be alone for a moment with our own nafs. Guide us, Ya Allah. Support us, Ya Allah. For we're in poverty and desperately in need of your spiritual support, Ya Allah. We have nothing compared to you, Ya Allah, and you have everything that exists, that did exist, and will exist. It's all your creation, Ya Allah. Everything comes from you, Ya Allah. Everything returns to you, Ya Allah. And we pray to be among those who return to you in a good way, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, forgive, guide, and bless us. Support us, especially during this holy month of Muharram. Let this be a month of spiritual transformation for us. that we may have the character of Imam Hussain and those who stood devoutly and resolutely with him in the face of immense evil and corruption and fitna and tyranny and violence. Ya Allah, bless their souls, raise their stations in your divine presence, and may their memory never be forgotten. For the sake of your beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sadi Rabbi wa sallim ala jami anbiyahi wa mursaleen wa alin kurin ajma'in walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Thank you for joining us on this Monday, the 24th of July, or the 6th of Muharram, for this Sohbet and Sufi meditation. I am here next Monday as well. If people want to join me here in person, and obviously it's the summer, so I'm not sure after that. There may be 1 or 2 weeks where I will be elsewhere, but it's still, if I can do this, I will do it. Also on Friday, I'll be back online, inshallah, for my Friday reflections. Now, I wish you all a most blessed and wonderful week, filled with light and blessings. And if you're in the UK, have a very good evening. And wherever you are in the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.